Pearson Sharp. Thomas Jefferson famously, probably, said, "When the government fears the people, there is liberty. When the people fear the government, there is tyranny." For the last few decades, we've been living under the iron boot of a rogue government that absolutely has no respect for the people it's supposed to serve. From Waco to Ruby Ridge to the Katrina gun confiscation to the Clive and Bundy standoff to the raid on Mar-a-Lago, the important thing to remember today and every day is that the government is your enemy. It's a simple philosophy that's never far from my heart because our beloved tyrants in Washington take every opportunity to remind us that they're not here to protect or serve us. Today, I wanted to talk about an incredibly tragic story out of Arkansas. Now, this happened back under Joseph Biden, back in March of 2024, but there have been similar cases since then that prove this is just standard operating procedure for a government that hates we the people. The only difference now is that President Trump is in charge and he's cleaning house at a historic rate, faster than I think anyone thought possible. And hopefully he'll purge the jackbooted fascists who make stories like this one possible. I've talked about our government abusing their authority before, and the IRS goons that might soon start showing up on your doorstep. But this is the kind of thing that we're all afraid of. What amounts to a no-knock raid in the wee hours of the morning from a government hit squad sent to assault a private citizen who is then shot and killed. And the courts ruled that it was all legal and justified, and no charges will be filed. I'm sure the fact that her husband was murdered legally will be of great comfort for the dead man's wife. This happened back in March and involves agents from the ATF showing up at the house of Mr. Bryan Malinowski in Little Rock. The ATF was serving a warrant to search his home for guns, and they claimed that he was selling guns without a license and that some of the guns that he allegedly sold were recovered from a crime scene, although apparently they weren't used in the crime. It's a gray area because you can legally sell guns without a license if you're just a collector. Did Bryan cross that line? Who's to say? He'll never get his day in court.
It's legal to buy, trade, and sell guns without a federal firearms license if you are a collector or hobbyist. But at some point, the ATF decided that Bryan Malinowski had crossed a murky line, and he was no longer a hobbyist. But one thing seems certain. Bryan Malinowski received no warning. His family, his friends, his work colleagues would all guarantee you he loved his career and he would have never knowingly jeopardized it over a weekend hobby.
So a convoy of no less than 10 government goon wagons show up to Bryan's house at 6 a.m. for a pre-dawn raid, roll up to his front door, and put tape over the video camera. Now, why would you want to cover up the video camera? Literally, the only reason you cover up a video camera is so that people can't see what you're doing. Oh, and the agents just happened to not be wearing their body cameras, which is required by the law because, and this is their official reason, their field office just hasn't gotten around to buying them yet. So they march up to Bryan's door with rifles drawn, ready to fire, and then bang on the door and announce their presence. They gave him and his wife a whole 28 seconds to open the door at 6 a.m., an hour before sunrise. I don't know about you, but if someone starts banging on my door at 6 a.m., it's probably gonna take me a good few minutes to get down there, and I won't be greeting you with a smile. So without waiting for him to answer the door, they use a battering ram to breach and barge inside. This is every American's worst nightmare. Unknown intruders breaking into your home when you and your family are in bed. Well, Bryan reacted like I think many of us would and assumed that these intruders were hostiles. And he wasn't wrong. Bryan opened fire to defend his family because he didn't know who these people were or what the hell they were doing in his house. The agents fired back, and the rest is history. This is hard to listen to, but here is a police recording of his wife, terrified, in tears, sobbing over her dead husband and begging the agents to tell her why they shot him.
Can I call my neighbors? They're worried.
No. They're gonna be fine.
Take care of them. I take care of them.
It's okay. Give us a second to work through this.
Oh, my husband is dead. My husband is dead. My husband is dead. Why did you shoot my husband?
Since I met my wife and we got married, this kind of thing hits me a lot harder than it used to. And hearing his wife's voice is absolutely gutting. You can't help but wonder, what would you do in that situation? What would you be feeling? Whatever Bryan did or didn't do, the pain in his wife's voice is utterly heartbreaking.
But on March 19th at 6:01 a.m., over 1 hour before sunup, 10 carloads of ATF agents and Little Rock Police Department officers came to the Malinowski home to execute their search warrant. Not an arrest warrant, search warrant. At 6:02:46 a.m., ATF agents in full SWAT gear approached the front door. They had a piece of tape ready to cover the camera lens of the doorbell camera, which they did. Next, Mrs. Malinowski heard only a loud crash as her front door caved in. Her husband Bryan woke up to the sound of the crash, found a pistol, loaded a magazine, and left the bedroom to investigate. Bryan warned his wife to stay behind in the bedroom, but Mayor stubbornly followed him down the hallway. The ATF apparently killed electricity to the home. The front room was usually well lit at night, but Mrs. Malinowski saw only darkness as she peered down towards the front entryway. She could only see shadowy outlines of presumed home invaders standing in her front hallway. That's what Bryan saw too. Bryan fired a few shots at the intruders' feet to drive them back out of the front door. The ATF shot Bryan in the head. His wife was standing inches away from him. A mere 57 seconds. 57 seconds elapsed from the time agents covered the doorbell camera until gunshots erupted and Bryan was fatally wounded. 6:02:46 to 6:03:43. Agents immediately dragged Mrs. Malinowski into the front yard. She was barefoot, wearing minimal night clothing, and the temperature was 34 degrees. They locked her in the back seat of a car and detained her there for 4 hours, refusing her many requests to check on her husband she had just seen shot, wouldn't allow her to get close or even use the neighbor's bathroom. Even though policies have been in place at both the ATF and the Little Rock Police Department for the past 3 years, requiring the use of body-worn cameras when executing any search warrant, the Department of Justice tells us that no body cameras were used. If this isn't the weaponization of government, I don't know what is.
Now, the courts that are totally on the side of the people ruled that the agents were justified in defending themselves. That may be, but they shouldn't have been there in the first place. The ATF created this situation because the big question is, why didn't these commie agents try to contact Bryan during the day? They know where he works. They know how to reach him during business hours. Why didn't they try calling him even once? Well, they didn't. Instead, they just rolled up in the pitch black of night with their Stasi crew locked and loaded, ready to take down an American citizen who may or may not be breaking the law. According to his widow, they both thought there were intruders breaking into their home. They had no idea it was the feds. I guess it doesn't make much difference though. Intruders or feds, they're both home invaders who can and did kill him. Thank God President Trump is in office. We can only pray that he and his team can root out this evil, because we as free, private American citizens should be outraged about this. But it just gets covered up and disappears into the news cycle, barely a mention anywhere. In fact, I bet most of you watching this today have never even heard of this case. And like I said at the start, this isn't the only case. Just back in December, a man named Doug Harless from Kentucky was shot and killed by police officers when they mistakenly raided his house instead of the house next door. The bottom line is this: criminal or not, Bryan Malinowski is dead now. Do you think he deserved to be shot and killed? Was the ATF justified in kicking down his door without trying to contact him first after covering up the only camera, apparently killing power to the home, and breaking the law by not wearing their own body cameras? Well, whatever you think, a man is dead. His wife is a widow now, and Americans everywhere are reminded that the government can legally break into your home, shoot you, kill you, and the courts will be on their side. Sic semper tyrannis.